was just wondering. I was just wondering. I was just wondering.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to continue with the committee.
This sitting is resumed. We revert to Standing Finance Committee.
This House is now in Standing Finance Committee. Honorable Member for St. Michael Northwest.
Thank you, Chair. First, let me congratulate the Minister and his team for a job well done so far. Minister, through you, sir, my concern relates to the Welfare Department. The Welfare Department is a very demanding department under your ministry. I know that when it comes to resources, whether it be at the level of staff, it's very demanding. When it comes to resources, in relation to being able to accommodate every single applicant, I know that that also is very demanding. My question to you, sir, relates to families who may reach out to the welfare in relation to bill payments. For example, I have a few families that came to me previously in relation to assistance with either paying their light bill or their water bill. So let's say a family who has a light bill or water bill for $500 and an application is submitted to the Welfare Department for assistance in paying that bill. And for some unfortunate reason, let's say that application had to slip through the cracks and the family continued receiving a bill. And a few months later, that bill came in now for $5,000 from $500. And let's say the Welfare Department decides to pay half of that $5,000, which left the family with the remainder to pay on their own. The problem that I have with that is if the family can't pay the $500 and the bill increased to $5,000, and the Welfare Department, obviously with its limited resources, decide that they will pay half of that bill, which is $2,500. What is that family supposed to do if it cannot pay the balance of the $2,500? That's my first question to you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Member, for the question. It's always the intention to help persons in as much as you can. I think it's also important to recognize, though, that at the Welfare Department, persons are helped after consultation, after conversation, to see what are the circumstances. Is the person capable of making a payment? Is the person not capable of making a payment? Were these bills paid before? I mean, there are a number of questions that go in to a final determination as to whether the bill is paid, how much of it is paid, and so on. But there's never any intention to disadvantage a person who is in a position not to pay. So I will let the Deputy Chief Welfare Officer respond, and I have a few thoughts which I will bring at the end.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Bobwith. I'm the Deputy Chief Welfare Officer. And to answer your question as it relates to the bill payment, when we go into the household, we definitely engage with all the individuals within the household. And sometimes you will find that, yes, one person may present as the individual who made the request. But upon investigation, sometimes we find that there are other persons within the household who may have some form of income, and we encourage family dynamics as it relates to being able to collaborate and collate that information together, monies together, to be able to assist with that bill pay that is required for the whole household to benefit from it in those cases. Does that answer your question?
Well, to be honest with you, ma'am, I know of a situation that actually materialized the way you just explained it. But unfortunately, when you have some family members that don't like to, I don't really want to say pull the weight, but that's the reality, right? And that family have to live without electricity. What next?
Well, indeed, we would put back on the electricity. But again, because of the department's mandate being the resolution of individual and family problems, one of our mandate is to work with that family to get persons to understand why it is important once they are in the household to be able to share with each other, because all persons in the household needs to be able to work together. We know that it has been a problem, and we've seen it coming out of COVID where that has escalated. But the mandate of the department definitely will be with working with those families and to be able to share and to understand the benefits of working together in terms of for the household good.
Okay.
I remember, just to add some clarity too, I wouldn't want to give the impression that in every instance the bill is going to be paid. I think the truth is that the challenge that we're seeing in these social services with finite resources is that there's only so much you can do. You can't pay every bill all the time. I just want to be honest with Barbados. You can't pay all the bills all the time. And you know what's compounding this situation for us is that, and you hit the nail on the head, honorable member, you have situations where the collective income of a household not only exceeds the poverty line, but puts the persons sometimes where they are comfortably bordering sometimes on middle class, or close to. But the relationships in the household are such that you have 5 independent beings in one house. When the assessment is done of the house, it is done of the household income. So you might find a case where the household income is above that which you would generally be able to, on its own merit, get welfare support. But the dynamics within the household make it such that, the one person ends up carrying the weight. The cases that we're most familiar with, all of us in this room, I'm sure all of us, would be oftentimes a mother who has gotten older. She's the matriarch of the house. She traditionally has been the person paying the bills. Then oftentimes the children come up, get their own jobs. They don't pay any attention to the mother. Their money is for whatever they want to spend their money on. The poor lady, her money is still to carry the household, the children, and then their children, so that the burden is unfairly placed on a mother. Now, you don't want a situation where obviously you disadvantage that mother, but that household requires conversation. And that is why I think the Department of Family Services is going to be very, very important, because you have to look at the overall family dynamics. That is unsustainable. That is the truth. It is unsustainable to suggest that we will always be able to pay those bills. It is also unfair to think that the government should have to, when the collective income of the household is such that it should be able, if persons, a PM likes to say, apply the heart to wisdom, if you look at the entire house, your budget is enough. But you have, in cases, I'm sure, again, all of us in here know, you go to a house, sometimes there are 3 fridges. Everybody got a fridge in their room. One person can't access the other person's fridge. They got their own televisions. This body can't touch the person's TV. You understand? So these things serve to complicate and compound the situation. Now, You don't want the mother to go, the household to go without electricity because the children who are the young ones in the house don't deserve it. And the mother who's probably trying her best don't deserve it. But there's an in-between sometimes. I mean, I'm just being real, huh? There's an in-between sometimes that makes you wonder, like, what are you doing? And that is why all the officers behind me will tell you about mindset and breaking mindset. And the One Family program is a lot about family dynamics and resolving those conflicts and hopefully being able to settle some of these things, because it's not going to be every case where the welfare department or the new Family Services Authority or the One Family is going to recommend payment of the bill.
Thank you. My second question relates to the companionship program. I recall back in 2020, at least 15 names were recommended at the level of for employment. What I wanted to find out from you, sir, in this financial year, I can honestly say that I still have a few recommendations, that are still pending in relation to names for employment. I wanted to know if within this financial year, if the remainder of my recommendations, because obviously my constituents need work and need jobs as well, if within this financial year, if the remainder of the recommendations that were submitted to the coordinator for this program will be honored.
Right, so I was seeking some clarity. I know that the original position was that everybody should have, that every constituency had about 15. You don't have 15? Huh?
No, sir, I don't.
And this has been so from the beginning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, well, allow me to speak to, this is something that could be resolved offline. Allow me to speak to the staff on this one and to see what is possible. It was also too, though, that the persons had to have, the community had to also be producing older persons who wanted the service. So the elder companions normally brought older persons who wanted somebody to care for them. So if that is the case, if there are older people in the community who've come forward and need the help, and you've recommended persons within your numbers, then it should be a no-brainer, really. So just allow me to check on it for you. As a matter of fact, allow me to check the numbers, period, for everybody.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member for St. Michael North. No, I'm going to the other member. That's why he said North. Honorable Member for St. Michael North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me preface my quick questions. I'm not going to take up too much time, but I have 3 questions. But let me preface them by applauding and commending the minister and his team for a stellar performance so far in this ministry and in the efforts to help us relative to poverty alleviation, to social services and their administration, the reform of such, and to putting us in a better position to be able to empower and enfranchise our people. I think that this ministry in its various iterations and nomenclatures over the years, social services, et cetera, it has been one of the most impactful ministries relative to the average citizen in Barbados. And I think that the minister and his team need to be commended and applauded for the work that they have been doing to sustain, even through the major economic shocks and world shocks and global shocks that we have experienced, even if environmental shocks that we've experienced, this ministry has been able to hold the Barbadian society together and stable. And I therefore think that you need to be commended for that, and I applaud you sincerely for the work that has been done. As it relates to your estimates for this year, there are 3 areas that I wanted to give you the opportunity to expand upon. I've not heard enough mention on them so far for the day. And I think that speaks to the fact that you have such a wide remit that we've been able to cover so many other areas of your mandate so far, but we haven't touched on these particular programs. I speak firstly, and I'm going to ask all of my questions in one so that I don't have to come back unless I have a follow-up question, but I'm looking at sub-program 0056, which is the Behavioral Change Unit. There's about $2 million that has been allocated to that ministry. It looks actually like if it is a $2 million increase that has been given to this specific unit. But I'm not entirely sure that I've heard in the presentation so far today what this unit actually does. And I think that the people of Barbados would benefit from being able to hear further elucidation on that. I'm sure that if it is something that benefits the average person in St. Michael North, my people will be very keen on hearing what that behavioral change unit has been mandated to do with this $2 million in the upcoming fiscal year. Second question relates to the expanded scope under sub-program 0053. You mentioned it, Minister, in your opening presentation. You mentioned that there's an expanded scope and remit for the National HIV/AIDS Commission. You mentioned the word wellness being attached to that. I believe you're speaking to the mandate of the commission being broadened to not only focus on HIV/AIDS related matters, but to go a little bit broader than that. But we have not heard much discussion on it or presentation on it for the day so far. So I'd love to hear a little bit more relative to what that expanded scope and mandate of that commission will be and how it ties into the overall wellness of our people. And then lastly, there's a sub-program 0564, which relates to family affairs. And there's about $2.3 million that is under that sub-program. I'm not entirely sure what that money is allocated to do or accomplish. So I'm giving you the opportunity, Minister and team, to explain a little bit more to us, keeping in mind and noting that this is separate and distinct from the $6.5 million that has been allocated for the One Family initiative. So I just wanted to figure out what is the difference, and once again, if that family affairs sub-program can benefit the people of St. Michael North, I'll be glad to hear what exactly it is in there that will be for them. And even as I say that and tie it to the One Family initiative, which I think from all I've heard is an extremely important initiative and program. I look forward to it bearing the fruit that we're looking for it to bear. I heard mention in passing that one of the pillars relates to health. And I also heard NCDs being mentioned in there. And given my remit within the Ministry of Health and Wellness, being responsible for all things wellness, NCDs being a major part of that, I was just wondering if, and this is to the officer who would have presented on the One Family, I was just wondering if there has been any connection made with the National Nutrition Center, one, relative to how we coordinate those meals, in terms of their nutritional content, etc. And further, if we've had any conversations or strategic alignment with the National NCD Commission. And there's also a National Task Force on Wellness. All three of these areas are doing a phenomenal job to help us to wrestle the issue of NCDs to the ground in Barbados. The NCD burden is significant. It is said that 8 out of 10 deaths in Barbados are as a result of NCDs. So this is not specific to the clients usually seen by the Ministry of People Empowerment and Health Affairs. This is across the Barbadian landscape. It is a massive problem and it needs to be tackled and addressed. So therefore, I want us to, and I encourage a whole of government approach to how we deal with these things. Hence why I'm asking if there's been any strategic alignment and conversations and inclusion of the NCD Commission, the National Task Force on Wellness, and of course, the National Nutritional Center with reference to the plans and the pillars under the One Family. So those are my 3 questions, Minister, and I look forward to the explanations and the answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member, for those very pointed and well thought out questions. The first 2 questions are actually very tight. The number you see in the estimates for the Behavioral Change Unit is actually the expanded scope for the National HIV Commission. So the estimates have to be corrected to reflect the new name of the entity, which is the National Wellbeing and HIV Commission, and not the Social Behavior Change Unit. But the two questions are tied, so I think the director of the new National Wellbeing and HIV Commission will be best positioned to answer this question, so I would invite her to respond to the first two questions, which are invariably tied.
Good afternoon. Lynn Armstrong, Director, Acting National HIV/AIDS Commission. As it stands, the National HIV/AIDS Commission has had significant successes as the coordinator of the multi-sectoral HIV program. However, in our discussions last year, for last year's estimates, we were given a mandate to do what we consider re-engineering, reorienting, and reimagining the department as it is. Based on an entire year of discussions, we would have met with the Ministry of Health just recently. You were in that meeting, sir. We would have been going back and forth with names. So the behavior change unit was just widely, broadly put out there. That is not what the final name is, and we were advised by Minister Humphrey that the name shall be the National Wellbeing and HIV Commission. Sorry, we see it as HIV has had and has worked and continues to work through many cross-cutting themes. And they include gender, poverty, persons living with disabilities. So it touches all. No, I cannot speak to we have not yet had a meeting with the National Commission, NCD Commission, neither the Task Force on Wellness, because as I said, this is all in the embryonic stage. But we will now have to have a series of planning meetings. We know what we would like to see our programming be, but as I said, we have literally just been given our official new name. However, we do have plans for the year. I'm going to ask my colleague, Nicole Drakes, to share some of the activities that you're inquiring about.
Good afternoon. Nicole Drakes, Deputy Director, Acting National HIV/AIDS Commission. So some of the activities that we intend to do, we intend to continue our supplemental social support program. This is an initiative whereby the Commission provides additional support to persons who have either exhausted all the services being offered by the Welfare Department or the Ministry of Health and Wellness, or for whatever reason cannot access those services. So that would include provision of food and nutrition support, psychosocial support in the form of referrals, social service referrals, housing support via the Interagency Housing Committee, on which the acting director sits. And also we assist children of people living with HIV with provision of back to school supplies. We're also looking to revamp two of our initiatives, the Man Aware program, which is a health promotion initiative targeting men. We've been running that since 2016, and also the Speak Sister program, which was initially implemented in 2004, but we've since relaunched in 2023, and that focuses on women. So our plans are to take those programs and introduce new components apart from HIV. So we can have an employment component, we can have a housing component, we can have an education component. And however, we do that in consultation with the relevant stakeholders, and also by interacting and obtaining information from the target group. So they will be an integral part of developing those initiatives. We are also looking at utilizing new media, the social media, because right now we tend to rely rather heavily on the traditional media, TV, radio, and print. We've started doing more social media, but we need to really expand it. And as we go forward with our social behavior change initiatives, we really need to make sure that whatever communication products we put out there, they support what interventions we're going to have, and that we tailor them to the needs of the audience, which means that research is also going to form a pivotal part of what we're doing, along with the monitoring evaluation, to allow us to have that necessary quality assurance to ensure that what we're doing is we're doing the right thing, reaching the right people, and in the right way, and using the right standards.
I think also I'll ask Mr. Wiltshire to speak as well to the matter.
Good afternoon, Jacqueline Wiltshire, and I work with the Elder Affairs Program, which is headed by the Honorable Member for St. Thomas, Cynthia Forde. By the year 2050 is projected, if we go on the trajectory that we are on now, about a quarter of the population of Barbados will be 65 or over. And therefore, we have to start putting the measures in place now under that program, which will impact on how seniors live as we go towards 2050. So we looked at the National Policy on Aging for Barbados, Healthy and Active Aging for All, and this policy was, in fact, approved, finalized and approved by Cabinet, and we have already begun its implementation. Also under that program, we have established the Aging Policy Implementation Committee, and this will be a steering committee of the primary stakeholders and strategic stakeholders to help with the implementation and steer the implementation of that policy. And part of the policy recommended the elaboration of new legislation, omnibus legislation on the rights of older persons, and already we are working on the draft and instructions towards the elaboration of that legislation, which will cover all the basis issues relating to aging and the rights of older persons. It's a rights-based piece of legislation, and it hopes to, in fact, preserve the dignity and quality of life of older persons in Barbados. We also, under that program, recognize super centenarians. Well, the centenarians will be visited by the president and there'll be fanfare. But thereafter, and we know they're becoming more and more super centenarians. So thereafter, we recognize those persons who go from 101 to the latest one that we want was 107, and unfortunately, he passed away this week. Also, we also negotiate with the rural and urban commissions because shelter is a very, a very critical issue in relating to the growing number of elderly people, and therefore we look to see what could be done to make their lives better, whether there be building of ramps, whether there be alterations of homes, building and repairs. There's also a Granddaddy Intergenerational Mentorship Project. We were told, I heard earlier today about how important it is for the intergeneration interaction. And this Granddaddy project looking at older males, senior males, interacting particularly with boys. And this also is relating to the gender issues we have in our society, and the fact that boys seem to be sometimes falling back and therefore needed to have some sort of inspiration or motivation to do well and to do the best that they can. So in the primary schools, there's this interaction with the older males and the Granddaddy Project and the younger males, and both of them will benefit. It's mutual benefit because the older males will feel that they're still worthwhile and contributing, and the younger males will have the mentorship benefit. So the special advisor spoke to the elder focus training, and that is a bespoke program through the SJPI, as well as a more advanced course through the Barbados Community College. They also do a lot of seminars in the society, in the communities, where you go and you let people give you their concerns, talk about the issues relating to looking after elderly people, issues around aging, and it also offers us the opportunity to gain the information that we need to build programming in the communities. There's research that has also been done under that same program, and our latest research, we know that we have the elder care program, which is going very well, but it also may need to be supplemented as time goes on, and we have more and more older persons. So we're looking at how can we use artificial intelligence, not to replace human contact, but just to supplement what is available to assist with reducing isolation and loneliness, which is one, is an area that is critical among the elderly as they grow older. And we are chronicling our nation builders, as well as under this program also falls the National Senior Games, as you know, which is part of the Healthy and Active Aging. And we, of course, and if you know Ms. Forde, there's persistent advocacy on every single platform she could find or create for the rights of older persons. So these are coming out next year. We look to continue these programs, and especially also we have a hotline for the elders. So we want to even expand that program so that to take in as well weekends, because right now we do it in the week. So we're going to expand that elder hotline, because when those calls come in, we are then referred to the appropriate authority for whatever assistance that could be given to those persons who are in need, those elder persons who are in need. So these are just a few of the things that we are doing under that particular program that you spoke about. Thank you.
If I can just, as a follow-up, before you answer the third question, just to say to the two directors from the HIV/AIDS Commission that I applaud you for the efforts being made so far to reform your specific unit. It is important, given the relevance of the changes that are taking place demographically across our society. I heard, and I'm sure that the minister will ensure that there is no duplication of effort, because I did hear that there will be some housing efforts and employment opportunities and different things like that would also be offered under that initiative. And I also know that the One Family has, as a part of its mandate, that same responsibility for housing and employment and different things like that. So I'm sure that the minister is quite in tune with that and will ensure that there is a cross-fertilization and not necessarily a cannibalization of effort across the ministry. So I therefore want to just say to Director Lynn, I want to say to the director that we look forward at the Ministry of Health and Wellness to having those strategic conversations with you relative to the changing of your mandate and scope to include a more focus on healthcare. And the NCD Commission, I can speak on their behalf, and the Task Force of Wellness, they too will be in tow with us to ensure that we can intergovernmentally fix and address this issue. Minister, the third question related to the Family Affairs Head subprogram, 0564, and how it ties into the One Family, which is 0464.
I will ask the PS to address this question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subprogram 0564, Elder and Family Affairs, makes provision for a number of items related to the family. You would notice that the provision for this year, as you said, is $2,286,975, which is an increase of $813,775 from this current year's provision of $1,473,200. And one of the reasons for that substantial increase in this program is simply because of the fact that the provision for the cost of the amalgamation exercise is provided for in this particular subprogram, including the outfitting of the satellite offices that I spoke earlier of, as well as some short-term specialized consultancies to ensure that the various facets of the amalgamation are addressed successfully. This program also makes provision for, as my colleague Dr. Wiltshire earlier said, the National Senior Games. It makes provision for the rollout of the National Strategic Plan. You may recall that we spoke earlier of the National Policy on Aging. That policy was accompanied by a detailed strategic plan, so we have made provision for the implementation of that plan in this particular sub-program. This sub-program also addresses a number of items related to child protection. As we are aware, there is currently before Parliament the child protection legislation. That legislation is going to entail a lot of public education, so we have made provision in this sub-program for that public education exercise, which we expect will be undertaken early in the new year. This program also makes provision for the presentation of Barbados record to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child. We do believe that probably in 2025 we'll be asked to provide what is called a simplified reporting to that committee. So we would wish to ensure that we bring the requisite services on board to prepare that very comprehensive and detailed report. So, and of course, Dr. Wiltshire in her earlier submission spoke on various matters which are being addressed in relation to the elderly. So provision for those particular initiatives are also made provision for in this sub-program. So generally, this sub-program makes provision for a number of items related to child protection, the elderly, but particularly the amalgamation exercise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Minister and team, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Chair and Honorable Minister. The 38th Vice President of America once said, Hubert Humphrey, I don't know if he's related to you, but but he probably has the same DNA, civil rights activist, etc. He once said that the moral test of any government is how it treats its most vulnerable. I will seek today to ask you questions that will cover those dimensions. Those in the dawn of their life, the young people, children as we know them, those in the twilight that are dear to my heart, even the Member of Parliament who represents the epicenter of Barbados in front of me from St. Thomas. And I represent the Fulcrum of Christchurch, so don't look wrong. Those in the twilight of their years, the elderly, and of course, the disabled community. My first question to you relates to those in the dawn, the children. I know you would have spoken earlier at length about the child protection legislation. And we know there's a sister legislation that is coming from the minister responsible for home affairs, child justice. I want to know from you, Minister, the challenges in Barbados, because sometimes when we hear about child protection, we often ask the question, why did it come to this? Why would a government have to legislate to bring Barbadians to the Christian understanding that we need to take care of those in the dawn of their lives, those children? That's supposed to be a basic understanding, a human instinct. And I want to know the challenges that you would have encountered as minister and your ministry as it relates, whether they're physical, mental, social, if there are challenges with education, housing. I know climate change is a challenge that affects all dimensions. I want to know to you, Minister, how did we get here and what this legislation will do to ensure that we are able to protect those young people so that they could become the future of this country. So, Minister, it's over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for the question, Honorable Member. I will speak very briefly and ask the Director of the Child Care Board to speak. Honorable Member, this, like you imagine, like everyone in this chamber, this is a situation that I think pricks at the collective conscience of all of us and really of the nation. Nobody likes to think of a child being hurt or of a child being abused or any of those things. The unfortunate reality is that when we brought the Child Protection Bill to address the legislation that in some cases was 120 years old, 120 years old. Some of the legislation in Barbados for protecting children, there were some persons concerned, in some cases, about things that were well within the bill, in terms of the language and so on, and like a government that listens, we went back. We took the bill to select committee, and we've made some changes at select committee. I believe the bill should be back on the floor of Parliament in its amended form very soon. But there were also some things that came out that were not in the bill. There were some things that, excited the public that had nothing whatsoever to do with the bill. And I think we also worked to try to educate the public about what the bill was dealing with and why it was necessary to bring a new bill. When I spoke, Honorable Member, I said, these are reports. In 2019 to 2020, there were 495 cases reported of abuse involving 611 children. In 2020 to 2021, there were 437 cases reported involving 544 children. In 2021 to 2022, 538 cases involving 667 children, and 22 to 23, 560 involving 672 children. Thus far, until the end of January, there are 451 cases involving 547 children. Now, these sound like numbers, but every single one of those numbers really and truly is a child. A child. And I do not think that any of us in this room should be able to sleep at night. That is not why we are here. Recognizing that some people are taking advantage in this country of children. These are reported cases, naturally, which means that all may not be true, but it also suggests that there are some cases that I know that are not here. And that as a government, we have to put ourselves in a position to protect children. I believe the coming child protection legislation is the best effort to protect children in this country. I believe that the issues that were raised, we've dealt with them, and I do hope if other issues are raised when it comes back, that we can do so in a manner that is respectful of the reality of the bill. But, Honorable Member, your question is a good one. We have to do a lot more in this country for children. That is why we've been working, as I said in my opening, with a lot of the NGOs who do a lot of this work. We've been working with the international agencies, of course. We've been working with the other ministries, education, the Ministry of Home Affairs, recognizing that everybody has to carry this burden for Barbados, There is no person who occupies this chamber, none of us. Not one of us who would be or should be satisfied that even one single child in this country is being abused. And that is why we have to be able to pass serious legislation to protect the children of this country. I feel very strongly about it. I can tell that you do too. I will ask the Director of the Child Care Board perhaps to give even more context to why this bill is important.
Good afternoon. My name is Roseanne Richards, and I'm the Director of the Child Care Board. So to give a bit more context to what was said and to lend the statistics back to what is happening, we at the Child Care Board have been operating by some dated legislation, and the intended legislation, the new child protection law, when it's passed, will be giving us greater powers to perform our duties to make sure that all children in Barbados are indeed cared for and protected. Presently, we do our jobs. Once a matter is reported to us, we go there and we investigate, and in the event that the child is in harm or danger, we also would remove that child, and if that child could be placed into care or could be placed with another family member, that is also done. Presently, the legislation that we work with right now, there's no provision for mandatory reporting, and the new legislation would make provision for mandatory reporting and allow for a number of critical players to report in the event that they are aware or suspect that there's any form of abuse. And those persons that would be responsible for reporting would include parents, persons within the healthcare profession, be it medical practitioners, dentists, nurses, administrators of hospital or any medical facility. As it relates to education, a school principal, a teacher, or any other person in the teaching profession, a social worker, or any other person within a social work agency, law enforcement officers, internet providers, film technicians, computer technicians, or telecommunications technicians, any other person who provides health care, welfare, education, religious care, or law enforcement services, wholly or partly to a child, and any other person with virtue of the nature of their work. They have a duty of care to a child, and if they suspect any form of abuse, they would have to report. While we talk about reporting and cases of abuse, we also know that in some circumstances, there are persons out there within our community who, because of other vulnerabilities, they are left wanting or they're found wanting, and in some instances, we would have to also intervene. And from time to time, there are persons who become homeless or become vulnerable for other reasons, and the Child Care Board again would intervene. We have children who are in our care sometimes, and when they come into care, we work closely with the families with the hope that at some point in time, those children will be reunified or reunited with their families, because while it is good for a child to be raised within a family, there are some instances where that would not happen, and we would have to take those children into care. But the long-term view is to have children reunited with their families, because at the end of the day, the best place for a child to be raised is not within an institution, but within a family. So those are the things that we are doing to respond to the situation as it relates to children who are exposed to harm or danger, children who have been abused. And as a state, while we can't do it alone, we also are building partnerships with some of the service providers like the Optimists, the Soroptimists, and other agencies to make sure that we bring those measures to families or parents who are exposed to hardships or vulnerabilities. I should also say that the Child Care Board presently works closely with the Optimist Club, where we have an Adopt a Family program, and that program allows for families to be exposed to parenting training. While those persons are exposed to the training, the children of those parents are also taken care of while the parents are attending the training. This is once a month. It's been going for the last 2 years, and what we hope to do, those children who are in residential care, the parents of those children should also be exposed to training so that they will be better prepared to take responsibility for their children once they're reunited. Thank you.
Thank you. My second question, as I said, I will go to the another dimension, which is the elderly, very close to my heart. And I want to go straight to program 423. Well, it's no joke. Everybody in Barbados already knows that. Declare my hand from front. Program 423, Personal Social Service Delivery Program. And I'm going to sub-program 0428, National Assistance Board. And I want to go straight to the facilities. The facilities for the elderly. I want to commend you, Minister. I mean, anytime that a man as noble as yourself could coin a phrase, an axiom I would call it, people over politics, would have to be doing the things that you are doing. Because it's not only about talking the talk, but walking the walk for the people, especially the most vulnerable. And this program speaks to the centers, and I want to go to them. I know you would have done work with sweat expenditure to ensure that the centers are remodeled and rehabilitated. You've started to work with the Vauxhall Center. I've seen the estimates that you have in Lancaster to do. And there are probably some more that sits on the top of your mind, Minister. But along with those buildings, there must be equal marriage as it relates to the services delivered. And I want you to be able to elucidate to us those type of services that will be delivered at these centers that will improve the lives of those who live in the twilight. because they don't sit in some form of hibernated cocoon, though the elderly is very active, both in soul, body, and mind. And I want to be able to elaborate for us the social programs that will be available at these centers. What type of rehabilitation programs? I know that the elderly, they're very much interested in artificial intelligence like everybody else. They can use the computer, they understand how to WhatsApp. So, Mr. Minister, sir, can you elucidate, please, on these programs that will be offered in these new buildings? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Member. Your association and affection for older persons is well known. And I appreciate that you would choose to ask a question in relation to this particular topic. I will ask the Director of the National Assistance Board to respond to the question, and then I may share some thoughts at the end.
So the long-term goal of the programs, whether it's in our residential facilities or in the community in general, really speaks to home and community-based care for older persons and aging in place, and shifting away from that model of institutions where you put persons into facilities. Our research has shown, and even from our client satisfaction survey where an independent researcher would have spoken to our beneficiaries, persons prefer to stay in their homes and in their familiar environments where there are already social connections. So if we speak to the, and as I would have said before, we're looking at a continuum of services, understanding that older persons have diverse needs, and all of them are not just dependents waiting for recipients of state services. So as we speak to the residential facilities, we have the Vauxhall Senior Citizens Village. But we will just reopen that village, and our intention really is to recognize that it is not about territory, that we cannot do alone, and therefore we have to work with our partners primarily, and we've been getting a lot of support from the Barbados Association of Retired Persons. So part of the activities, we've just reopened as a part of the Vauxhall Senior Citizens Village, a new recreational facility, the first one that we will have in a space that is owned by the National Assistance Board or in other communities in Barbados, said before. And that we're inviting the community to come in and to use that space and to be integrated. Already we have had, through our relationship with BARP, they will be using that dedicated space to do activities for their members, as well as also to include some members from the community. As we move out of that, we look at the Georgetown Elderly Daycare Center, and we will be bringing, we have laid out, as I mentioned earlier, a whole set of training, and a part of that really will be activities for seniors, whether it's using assistive devices, whether it's using other skills, other professionals, and a great part of that will be our physiotherapists, who we already have 2 of them on board already, as well as bringing in other services where necessary. And I'm pleased to say that we have a philanthropic entity who will be assisting us and underwriting some of the costs for these programs. As we move wider in, and those are beneficiaries who are in our programs and our services, in facilities. As we move wider into the community, though, we have 21 recreational spaces, and that is where persons from the community, we are responsible for the operations and the operational costs. So we pay the staff. The older persons, they have input into determining what programs they want to do, and how we will get the resources to make that happen. So we're really looking to integrate social activity and social stimulation into all of our programs to keep persons as connected and as stimulated for as long as possible, but I reiterate that we'll be working very, very closely with our NGOs and all of our other partners who cater and provide services for older persons.
Thank you so much, Director. Honorable Member, you would also be happy to hear that the government's plan is to, as I mentioned earlier, build a facility in every parish to be able to help the older persons. But the philosophy, as was articulated by the Director, is such that we do not want to build institutions where old people are sent basically, you know, in the past, places where old people are sent today. These are going to be villages that we're hoping to run through our associations with BARP, Lisa Optimist, and other NGOs. It is fair to say that BARP has been doing excellent work in Barbados. I like the work BARP has done both in relation to being an advocate for older persons and an activist in keeping the government on its toes, but also the work it has been doing generally just to advance persons' rights as they get older, including the insurance that they offer, including the BARP card that allows people discounts and so on. But the villages that we intend to build are not supposed to be, they're not meant to be institutions where you go in and you have a whole lot of staff, and it is meant to foster and generate independent living to the extent that you can. It is also meant to have relationships with the communities to ensure that the community plays a part in helping us deal with the aging phenomena in Barbados. We also are conscious, obviously, that the traditional mechanisms of care that once characterized Barbadian society in relation to persons, you know, taking care of the older, we know that has changed, and that the role of the state has to change in relation to that. And that is why we're seeking to build out more of these facilities, but facilities in the sense that they are going to be communities and villages where people get to live, to express themselves freely, and hopefully be able to have that kind of contact. You know, one of the things that people ask me about oftentimes, believe it or not, is the space old people have when they go to the post office to cash checks. When we were going to go digital, there were concerns that this would mean they wouldn't have that space. But as a society, I think we have to create further spaces. We have to create more spaces, further opportunity for persons to have, you know, dialogue with one another, to relate. That is why the AI program is going to be important. The Granddaddy program that Minister Forde, that the Honorable Member for St. Thomas, Cynthia Forde, is doing in terms of, and maybe she should speak to it really, the Granddaddy program, I think that's going to be important in terms of passing on certain skills. But it is about allowing older persons to age in dignity. And then the last point I would make on this older person, Minister, is that the idea of a silver economy must make sense. I do not understand how it is so clear to me that the average Barbadian now is nearing 50. The average Barbadian is nearing 50. It presents two things. One, businesses now have an opportunity, I think, to market their items toward this aging population, because the truth is that will become to constitute the largest part of their consumers. And secondly, it also has to be that we have to create spaces for older persons to be able to be productive. There is a dilemma whenever I speak, when I say you gotta make space for old people to work, I see it on social media, the young people respond and say, you know, you're taking away the young people's jobs and so on and so forth. Both parties have to be able to live. But it is clear to me that as Barbados gets older, we have to create more opportunities for older persons to be able to be productive, as well as to recognize in the business side that these persons are part of a budding economy and should be treated with some respect. But I would ask Minister Forde to speak to her program, if she wishes, particularly the Granddaddy.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Minister, for your query. The Granddaddy project has been birthed from the vision of Dr. Richard and myself, because we recognize that we have so many boys in our society who are living in households with generally mothers only, brothers and sisters, and they need that male element to be able to help to strengthen them with their personalities and to be meaningful citizens and so on. We know the lifestyle of what happens in Barbados, and we're not blaming anybody in that respect, not am I, but sometimes a female has a partner and gets 2 children, and then they disagree. And that male partner goes, lives elsewhere, another partner comes, other children are there. And what we have recognized in our investigations is that those children from the next partner before, are then shunted in a corner. And men say to them, maybe don't get that boy no money food to eat. He might have father put the money in the court. And then these are the same boys that we see on the street. There's nobody to mentor them as a male. There are no connections with what used to happen in our communities, particularly at our schools, where we always had the scouts for boys. We also all had community activities going on in the villages where big men would see boys coming out of the corner and say, go for and hear this man talk. We're not seeing anything of that nature anymore. Our boys are just doing all kinds of strange things because they need that mentorship. We also have very few male teachers in our primary schools. Boys need the mentorship. So the Granddaddy Project, in the vision of Dr. Wiltshire and myself, was to help to engage men who are retired to work with these young boys, whether they be 15 or 7 or 4, whatever the age, in a pilot program. And the Ministry of Education bought into it quite readily, and we had determined that we will try for 4 locations in each of the zones to have the pilot going, because we feel that the mentorship coming from the males would strengthen our boys and give them that understanding that they have value, they have worth, and that people care for them. And the mentors linking with the mentees will help also to strengthen the mentors who are retired men. Some of them are teachers. There are about 10 of them who agreed in the first phase. Some of them are teachers. Some of them are persons who work with the St. John Ambulance Brigade, so boys can learn how to do CPR and different things that will engage them rather than be all over the place. One time boys used to roll a roller and get off some of the energies. Now they're doing all kinds of strange things. Adults are putting them to pass on things that are illegal to others. And our boys are really getting out of hand because of the nurturing component. So the Granddaddy Project, with the vision that we work towards, has been focusing on our males, young males, for mentorship with other males to be able to strengthen them in this kind of situation that they're in. The minister had asked about the seniors as well, and we have been trying to pull together some programs. For example, I know that the National Assistance Board had a group of persons, of volunteers, who were called the Helping Hands, and they will always be making themselves available. We do have people in communities otherwise who would want to serve the seniors. And there's absolutely nothing wrong. We have so many community centers and other locations in the parishes. The faith-based groups have their own church halls or areas of worship that we can engage our seniors in those situations as well and have them talk about the way we were. As a matter of fact, I pulled forward a little project that I want to be able to discuss with Dr. Wiltshire and the team and have it sent forward to the Honourable Minister and his team for these seniors, when they come together, to talk about the implements that they use, the tarts that they drank their tea from, and how people in the neighborhood built them. They used to take the tarts and the Tin Smith, whoever it was, would work on it. Some of them never had a new pair of shoes beside the first pair they had. It was a shoemaker. Talk to them about that, plaiting baskets, getting the penguin or the cane lily, we call it, to give them those experiences and have items on display that the children can touch, an enamel cup, an enamel plate, and things of that nature, a comor. They don't know what is an ottoman. They don't know what is a sad iron. And bring them back so that both of the generations will get those linkages, that it can make a tremendous difference in their lives. And I believe that if we call more on the faith-based institutions, as we have designed what we're doing, and other community groups to engage the seniors, it will get that kind of attraction to me that we are getting from Q in the community, because the seniors want to be engaged meaningfully and to be able to link, so the intergenerational linkages will continue to be nurtured.
And lastly, Minister, staying on the same program, 423, sub-program 0440, Barbados Council for the Disabled, of course. and subprogram 0435, National Disability Unit. As I said, the most vulnerable in society, the disabled community. I want you, Minister, because you would have spoken extensively about your work to help those with disabilities. And you would have spoken about programs. I want you to expound on these programs that will seek to integrate those persons into mainstream society so that we will have a tangible stake in Barbados. And I would not be true to myself if I didn't expand my vocal cords to say today that I was asked on behalf of a constituent to bring a concern to this chamber and to you, Minister, a concern from those who suffer, who we call the blind community. We are transitioning to fossil fuel. We have said, as part of our sustainable development goals, that by the year 2030, as much as possible, we will have a transition to electric vehicles. Now, those persons who are blind, they depend extensively on the ability to hear and to hear vehicles on the road so that we can traverse safely. It is a concern, Minister, that has been raised on more than one occasion by persons in my community. I have a number of blind persons in my community who are saying that since we have transitioned, we have started these electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, they are no longer hearing vehicles passing, and it is more dangerous for them to be able to move around this country. I know this will probably require you to have in-depth conversation with the minister responsible for transport and work. But the question that they're asking through me is if you are able to put some type of device on these very silent vehicles so that they'll be able to hear, of course, and ensure that their safety is maintained while traversing these areas. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I think I will ask the Most Honorable Carrie-Ann Eiffel to speak because the funds for the Council for the Disabled that you asked about would fall under the council that she basically manages or runs. I think she's president. And I also know that the second question in relation to persons who are blind or visually impaired needing to hear vehicles was also one of the conversations that we had with the committee when the committee met with the Transport Board. And as I said, the committee had several meetings. And so I will ask the Most Honorable Carrie-Ann Eiffel to speak, both in terms of her capacity, if she chooses, as president of the Council for the Disabled, but also the meetings that would have been had with persons with disabilities during the several meetings that they would have had with the community.
Thank you, Minister. Carrie-Ann Eiffel. With regards to the second question, it is still definitely a query. This has been raised as high as the United Nations, who have developed a quiet car policy. This policy speaks to international agencies looking at their automotive vehicles and implementing the requirement legally, which I believe they have now done in the United States, to require vehicles to have an audio signal so as to assist with persons who are blind and visually impaired. In fact, it affects mainly the blind and visually impaired community, it is true, but several other members of the community are also impacted by the quiet cars, and therefore it is something that can be and should be addressed. However, I think sensitization, again, awareness raising, which is the director the assistant director pointed out, is one of the pillars of the National Disabilities Unit. It is one of the areas that needs to be continued with persons addressing transportation on the road, because generally speaking, we still have issues with persons who do not understand the need for the white cane, and when it is extended, how persons are supposed to traverse the communities. So therefore, there needs to be an ongoing awareness raising program, not just with regards to the quiet vehicles, but to pedestrians with disabilities, especially those who are sight and visually impaired. Thank you.
Thanks, Honourable Member for the question. I think the other question was in relation to the programs by the Council for the Disabled.
The Barbados Council for the Disabled, as we know, is the national governmental organization of which I have the honor to be the president. The council existed since 1976, and over the years we've run several programs. At present, the main programs we're running is we continue with the Fully Accessible Barbados program, which we consider to be our flagship, which accredits places around Barbados for their level of accessibility. Our second program that we're extremely committed to is the Disability Sensitivity Training. The Disability Sensitivity Training, we offer these services to government agencies, private sector, and other NGOs. Most recently, we conducted training with the Barbados, with the BFPA. And this is to sensitize persons, especially those who are interacting on a daily basis with the public, as to how to interact with, how to treat to, and how to serve the needs of persons with disabilities. Most recently, we adopted the My Inclusive School program, which seeks to recognize those schools who are making efforts to be more inclusive of students with disabilities. For example, one nursery in Barbados recognizes that they are being presented with more children with special needs, especially those on the autism spectrum. And they are seeking to establish a unit where children can, it's a sensitivity awareness program. Basically, it's a facility where children can have time out, where they can have sensory awareness program. In addition to that, the council continues to serve our several member organizations. Most recently, we welcomed the Barbados Kidney Association and the Barbados Down Syndrome Association. These two entities represent, and as you know, March is recognized as the month of the disabled, so that's coming up starting this Friday, and we have a number of programs, including public lectures conducted by both the National Disabilities Unit on March 27th, and on March the 5th, there will be one at the University of the West Indies as well. So we continue to do raising awareness and championing, and we also sit on a number of government subcommittees, most notably the committee to monitor the implementation of the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Committee on the Commission on the Rights of the Child. We also are part of the Social Justice and the National Wellness in the Workplace subcommittees. Thank you.
So, Honourable Member, you see a lot of work, and it is my privilege, I think, and pleasure to be associated with the Council, even in the tiny role that I get to play as Minister.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to start by congratulating the Minister and the team, because a lot of work has certainly been going on within this ministry to really reach out to Barbadians and to attend to those who are most in need, and to try to meet the needs as best we can with the limited resources. I believe last year when you were in the well, one of the concerns that I had raised was the issue with welfare being overwhelmed by the COVID pandemic and the quality of service that the department was able to deliver to people who were in urgent need. And therefore, I truly welcome the improvements in the organization in terms of the restructuring. I was very, very pleased to hear that. And I wanted to give an opportunity again to the PS to continue sharing on the restructuring program I wasn't sure if you'd finish completely what you wanted to say, but I was very, very keen on hearing that. And if at the same time you could speak to the issue of wellness for your staff, because welfare work, social welfare work, is emotionally draining and demanding. It is not easy. And if they are not refreshed and nourished, it is going to reflect itself in the quality of care that they provide to the public. And as part of your restructuring, I wanted to know about accountability for performance, as well as working with the NGOs and churches. A lot of churches have programs, as was mentioned by the Honourable Member for St. Thomas. I want to congratulate her on the excellent work that they're doing in their section. So I wanted to know about those things within your restructuring program. But let me congratulate you. What I'm hearing is good, and I sincerely welcome it.
Thank you, Honourable Member, and I thank you for the opportunity to give some further information and provide further context to what I said earlier in relation to the restructuring. Let me speak first to the point you made in relation to mental wellness of the staff. We recognize that the work, particularly that the social workers do, can be emotionally draining. And you know, when we embarked last year on the consultations with the staff in relation to the amalgamation, because we recognize that you're essentially bringing 4 different cultures together to form one culture, and therefore we recognize that there had to be intensive consultations with staff within the context of change management. And over that period of time, we held a number of town hall meetings, which we also had the input. We engaged the change management specialists to help us in this process. And I can recall distinctly at one town hall meeting, staff town hall meeting, when an officer from one of the boards indicated that after they have spent a lot of emotional energy in looking after their clients during the course of the day, at the end of the day, who look after us? And that was a very pertinent question that really had me thinking. And within that context, we recognize that we have to do a little more for the staff in terms of emotional wellness. And what we have done, we actually have a day for the staff where we bring all of the 1,200 staff members together from all the entities and have one very relaxing fun day. We embarked on this last year in May. We had over close to 1,000 members of staff, and they really enjoyed it. We're going to do that again this year in the month of May. As I said, we had some intensive stakeholder consultations with the staff. We are also going to be doing embarking on some other programs as well. We are going to be looking into the whole concept of flexible working hours for the staff, but that is something that when the new entity comes into being, they'll be looking to expand on that process. But if it could also speak in terms of the restructure, and I spoke earlier of the detailed organizational structure which the Minister will be presenting to Cabinet during the course on Thursday. And I spoke earlier in relation to that detailed organizational structure in terms of having those 4 directorates. But I want to also speak briefly on the new management information system which is being established for the new amalgamated entity, which, as I said earlier, is a central repository of information that allows systems to talk to each other, so that when you use that, you'll be using that only system to make an application, so that you will have all of the client notes there, so you would not have to be going to various locations to be able to evaluate that application. I spoke earlier in terms of change management. That is a process that we begun a number of months ago, and we are going to continue with that process even when the new entity is launched, because as I said earlier, it is a core issue of bringing 4 different cultures together to form one culture which would really enhance the service that we would be providing to the client. So the new entity will be launched within the next few months. I will not, that is a matter that the cabinet would have to determine in relation to that launch date. But certainly within the first half of this year, we are going to be seeing a new one-stop shop operation that would allow for the faster, more efficient, and more effective delivery of social service. Because we recognize that the fundamental point is that, and I think there's one important point we have to make in relation to this amalgamation. It is to treating the vulnerable with even more dignity than we currently treat to them now. Simply because of the fact that you have persons who are in a vulnerable state, you have to treat them with a certain element of dignity, and the whole objective of this amalgamation exercise is to be able to provide a comprehensive service to the vulnerable, and within that context, we are going to be doing a very comprehensive training program, which is going to emphasize customer relations for the clients who will be serviced by this new entity. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. The other area I want to move on to is care for the elderly. In my constituency, St. James South, I have 10,900 constituents. Of them, 6,297 are over the age of 50. 49.6% of my constituents are over the age of 65. I have an aged constituency. And therefore, the care that they are going to receive is going to be very important. And the government's program about seeking to institute in-place services to help them, because with the best will in the world, there is no way that we can house all of them in institutional care. And therefore, providing them with supports and services are important. But what I'm sharing with you today is to say to you, we need it now. We need it now. And there are a couple of things. I was very happy to hear what was shared by the various staff members about what is being done for the elderly. I wanted to ask of you that one of the things we have to do is to educate the broad Barbadian population about a number of things. What it means to be in an aged society, the importance of building out a silver economy, but more importantly, because every household will have to deal with an elderly person, and every member in a household will become old. How can we provide some basic training, some basic orientation for households to understand how to relate to the elderly? Because that dysfunction makes people want to put the elderly aside, and there is no planning to include and keep elderly people within a younger unit. Or you have what was outlined by your staff, where the older person is financially abused by the persons living in the household with them. Everybody taking care of their own things, but no one taking care of the basic care of the home and dealing with the basic bills, and leaving that person to the indignity of having to beg and having to suffer. And let me tell you, I feel very, very strongly about it. So I want to encourage that we develop a program for educating people. And I also want to, I love the idea of the care of the elderly with the program. I keep getting it wrong. I exchanged the names of the program, but the one where we hired people from the constituency to go in, the companion care program, yes. And one of the challenges that I had in my constituency, despite being an age constituency, is that people were afraid of having strangers in their homes. So I want to know if you can put in place a program that, one, provides the necessary training to the persons who go into people's homes so that they are appropriate in the space and people can build trust with them. Two, can there be a situation where the person who is going to receive care can meet or engage a set of the people that will be assigned to them to see maybe which ones they connect to better? I don't know how feasible that is, but I think it will help to break down the barriers. And three, can you put in place a program on television where elderly people who are satisfied with the care could share so that other elderly people could see, well, others are doing it, because they desperately need someone in their homes, because this is a generation that had 2 and 3 children. This is not the generation that had 8 and 9 and 10. So there is nobody to respond to them quickly. And then the other follow-up question to that is the supporting, do you have plans for any additional supporting in-home services? I know you may not have it in this budget, but you have it in thought to bring to bear, maybe in the next financial year. But thank you so much for the care that you're giving, but I need to hear some positive things on these matters because I have an aged constituency.
Madam Honorable Member for St. James South, if your numbers are true, you have a super aged constituency. And the implications for a super aged constituency as opposed to an aged constituency is different. Super age means that it's even more immediate because 21% is over 65. I will ask the director to speak, and then I will ask the former minister to speak. I'm sure she's doing wonderful work. And if Ms. Wiltshire is also speaking, because I think she just did a communication plan in relation to some of the things that you raised.
Thank you. I hear your concerns, but I also hear your very good recommendations. Well, education. I know that a lot of persons are calling for legislation, but yet we have to have the education not only for families, but education for older persons themselves, and the education cannot begin when persons get old. And we would have mentioned it a lot, and it's a reality, the whole issue of family dynamics. Culturally, our society has shifted, and we're not so much, in some cases, not caring for older persons. Unfortunately, some families are relinquishing their roles as persons get older and thinking that this is the responsibility for the state's responsibility. So therefore, we have to unlearn a lot of behavior. And then in addition to that, to the education, you can give all the education you want, but you also have to give families support where there are. A lot of families are burdened. So for some people's reality, sometimes we have cases of elder abuse where somebody is not getting access to health care, but when you do an assessment, you have to strike a balance with the family. It's a choice between, do I go to work today? Do I miss a whole day's work? I miss a day's pay, or in some cases lose my job? Or do I stay and take an elderly relative for care? And that is some of the realities that families are dealing with. And I know sometimes we bash families, but I want to say that there are a lot of families out there doing a lot of good work, and a lot of the success that we see in National Assistance Board is where we have families who are willing but may not necessarily have the skills and the support, and then we work alongside of them. So to go on to other interventions, as it relates to community care, for sure we are looking at that. Apart from daycare, some persons can still function in the community. Their relatives are at work during the day. They need supervision. And they need to be in a safe environment. So daycare then serves a dual role. Persons who are susceptible to elder abuse. So we really, really need to work with families, and in addition to that also is the whole issue of respite care. Sometimes we have elderly people caring for elderly. We have sick people who came out of work medically unfit, also caring for sick relatives, and there's a whole conundrum there. So we have to look at the whole issue of respite care to give the family, the caregiver, a break from the elderly person, also sometimes to give the elderly person a break from the caregiver. So some of those are some of the activities of the next financial year that we will be looking at, because yes, we're going to educate, but education of itself, even though it is necessary, it is not going to be sufficient. There has to be tangible support for families as well. And so that's a direction that we will be going in for sure.
I want to add our experiences over the past couple of months, and of course, mine, having had the privilege to work with my mother and my sister with Alzheimer's. And I want to say that with where our investigations are concerned, particularly when Dr. Wiltshire and I are working together, and we have a very happy marriage, I must tell you, I'm really grateful for her support because she brings knowledge and experience as well to this exercise. We have found that lots of families do not care if Sunday comes on a Monday when it comes to the elderly. Some of them are so terribly abused. The documentation is so heavy. Every day, at least 10 calls from family members who have abandoned their families. So I don't know if it is, I believe it is something we have to start with from in the schools, the nurseries as well, because young children are not bonding with seniors because most of them are in the day nursery or they're going to school early, and when they come in on evenings, they come in with their parents, and granny or granddad or whoever stepdad, they're in a corner. Few of our people in Barbados have remembered, well, let me say they have forgotten from whence they have come. And it is very, very heart-wrenching experience to hear the stories and to see the letters and the phone calls that we get daily as to what is happening in families. Our family dynamics are broken. And we need to do more within the institutions. But let me get straight to it to say that some of the ideas that we have come up with and started to flesh out will engage the training of families in communities. We have started already. I think we've done 3 so far across areas, and families have come out and said, but we did not understand that, we did not know, nobody ever told us, because the family dynamics now are not the same as the family dynamics when I was a child more than whatever many scores of years ago. Everybody shared the same food. Everybody shared the same space. You didn't have an individual bedroom or bathroom or patio or anything. You just did everything together. And whenever there was work in the household, all hands to be on deck. Nowadays, we're preparing the lunch and putting it on the table for the children. We're not even accepting when they come in and they don't say good evening, granny, grandma, grandpa, whatever. So the whole culture of Barbados is changing. I think that is adding to it. I must confess that there are families that are trying really very hard, but when there's only one working person in the house, it's a female generally, and that female has to leave to go out, not the abandonment, but they're missing that relationship, that service. Some people leave the food in the flask with all best intentions, but then the flask is covered too tight. So at lunchtime, the little feeble old hands are trying to open it. They can't because there's nothing happening. Yes, the idea of expanding the program for the elder care companion could work, but the concept of that elder care program was not for persons to be going all over Barbados and working. It was for people living in the communities where they live, that they will know, Miss Mary Jane, it is me, St. E. Well, I last to see you. And they say, come in here and let me talk now. And they know you, so the confidence is built up. But when you send, say for example, Jackson, when you send somebody from Lechma Hall, down to Jackson, to be an elder care companion. You don't know this person more than the man in the moon. So the element of trust is not there, unless the person has a bubbly personality and they engage them and so on and so forth. So that, for me, could work, but we need to train family members that we have started already. A lot of people would prefer you do it by Zoom. That is another aspect of it, but we have had some town halls. We've been to Christchurch, we've been to St. Thomas, we've been to a couple meetings already, and people were really very excited until numbers are called to say, we want to get in the elder care project, or we want to be able to find if the government will give us a little stipend to help at home. To my mind, that may not be able to work now, but to look after your mother, your father, your grandmother, whoever cared for you, and you want to get maintenance in the form of money, to my mind, that perhaps might be for persons who are unemployed. But I cannot see how it's happening right now, but it is consideration that could be given. That is one of the biggest problems. Our communities are not as close-knit as possible because the concept of the elder care companion came out of one lady in a village, whom I will not name, who would walk every morning to go to see her godmother and godfather. And because they were living alone, she would walk with breakfast for them because they were growing feeble. And then at lunchtime, when she cooked, she will go take food for them that she prepared for herself and make sure that they got something to eat. She didn't want them to be lighting the stove. And then on evenings, you call it supper time, whatever you call it, you will see her walking over to these same two old folks again with a cup of tea or barley or a slice of bread and cheese or an apple or something to make sure they were settled for the night. Fact that they lived alone and they were old and feeble. We have lost the community spirit, and that is really what is taking toll of what is happening to our seniors. It is unfortunate as well that some parents may have bequeathed whatever they had to the first boy child or the first girl child because they helped to give the money to build the little wall house or to upgrade the house. And then the other siblings determine, well, if you give all to him or to her, we have nothing to do with you. So the parents are in the house, they need a shower, they need a meal, they need a good anointing because of the arthritis, they need to have the administration of the medication, but they say, lady, what's this boy that you give to, and excuse my language, let him come and give it to you, or the girl that you give everything to, let her come and do it for you. It is unfortunate again, although this might be just tangential to what we're saying, that there are so many seniors who are taken to, our lawyer is taken to them, if it's a lawyer, an attorney, and the power of attorney and the deed of gift and all that. And strangers are also doing it. And these old people then, when they recognize, they say, we have been robbed, we have been cheated, we have been treated, and then they put them out of the house. So within recent times, we're hearing of persons being turned up and put off at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital with suitcases, because they are being abandoned, and then you hear, X told me to carry them there, and we ain't coming back, but they're living in the house. I've known of an experience with an old lady from Hillaby in St. Andrew, who used to walk to town with her basket. I knew her, I'm that young. And that old lady bought a house in Green Hill, and her daughter and the daughter's husband put her to live under the cellar. I believe I can still find that picture from the newspaper. And I'm saying, how can you treat that to your mother when your mother didn't go to high school, but she made the sacrifice for you? And you got your education, you got married, it's your mother's house, but she lives under the cellar of the house. And we're getting a lot of those complaints now. When I say we now, Dr. Wilcher and myself and any other persons who choose to give us any advice, and we appreciate it very much because we can't know everything. So I'm saying, unless we give the training to family members, not only in a school hall, community centers, that Barbados has so many community centers. We have so many schools that are shut off on evenings after school. We have many faith-based institutions that will be willing to come on board, and that is what we're looking at. And people in the village never got anything, but they used to look after their neighbor. I got cuckoo. You want some, mistress? And they take it over. If they needed to have something done, bring them a bucket of water from the standpoint, they will go and do it. So our whole cultural dynamics have changed, and we are seeing it now. And you have 10,000, but I have 11,000 and something, and mine are larger. And I'm begging people, go out, seek help, assist the old folks. Help them with something. It is not what you are spending now if you buy a few apples or carry a breadfruit or whatever, because that is village life. I don't know about urban life in the same way. And you take it or you peel it and cook it and give it to them. That is showing that you have that spirit of unity, that you are living what the Bible says, do unto others as you will have them do unto you. All of that is missing. And I'm afraid that our society is just going. It is about the house. It is about the money in the bank. It is about the jewelry. It is about dumping the senior citizens. It is about the abuse in all forms and fashions, including beating and tying them. And if we can get to families as we are working on the project, then we can see a difference in what is happening. And the crisis unit that is at the police, as a part of the police service now, that unit will tell you of stories. I have documents that people have sent to me from overseas about their families whose money has been taken. What can I do? Besides hold it, share it with the doctor, and let us see how best we can filter it through the system so that something can happen to save our older folk in this society who are the blood, sweat, and tears of our institutions and our communities, that they would have done that work in the cane field, in the bus, conducting the bus, driving the bus, working in the white people's houses. There's nothing wrong with that.
Honorable member, you can just
Thank
wrap
you,
up.
sir. Thank you, sir. Forgive me, sir. I'm in the elderly department too. I beg your pardon. I would have lost sight of the time. But I just want to conclude by saying, unless we work with families first and give them the information and show them how to do what and get the compassion, we're not going to get anywhere. So that is the next step, what we want, to spread it across the entire Barbados in order for persons to come out and learn, and for strangers and friends and godchildren and so to come in and assist, because we never know when our time will come if we will fall into that category. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, sir. I apologize again. A politician talks and talks facts.
Thank you. Honorable member.
I'll pause there.
Yeah,
I'll pause there. Yeah.
okay, thank you. Honorable member for St. John.
Thank you, Chair. 3 quick questions. The companionship program, it is impacting St. John in a really, really positive way. Speaking to Mr. Griffith, information is always readily available. My question to the minister and his team, are there any plans to expand this program? Because similar to the member for St. James South, I have a number of elderly persons that are coming on stream. So I need to know if there are any plans at all to expand the program. I think it's a companionship program.
Honorable member, I wish I could say yes. I would love to expand it. The truth is, I think all of us, if we speak individually, we will all say we have older persons simply because we have an aging population. I don't think that this will escape any of us. We have an aging population in Barbados. We also have the additional burden, as Minister Forde said very articulately, that the truth is that the society is not taking care of the old people the way they used to. So with an aging population and the need for the state to respond, it lends itself naturally for us wanting to have more persons on the program. I would like to say we will have more persons. I think Mr. Griffith and myself and the director, we've spoken about the need to perhaps make some changes to the structure of the program. But I also feel there is a case for the communities to step up. I feel there is a case also where possible for families to step up. So that the state responds, yes, we don't shirk our responsibility, but that the communities and families must really step up at this point in time. But I also feel that Barbadians do not fully understand me or the director or Mr. Griffith or whoever, Ms. Forde, when we speak about what is coming. I feel like Barbadians are taking this for granted. In the year 2024, the average Barbadian is almost 45. In another 20 years on this trajectory, it's easily the average Barbadian could be 60 or 50 enough. That has tremendous consequences for our society. You combine that with the fact that Barbadians are not having children, and I'm not going to tell Barbadians that they have to have children, because people hear, I say this and people hear what they want, but I'm just saying that they're not. That's a fact. So you have an aging population, you're not having any children, you have a small shrinking workforce. You have then to find a way to drive a society on this ratio, this dependency ratio, which I won't get into now, but essentially what it means is that you do not have enough people who are working to take care of the people who are not working. It is going to be problematic for Barbados. And it is going to require a conversation, a mature, hopefully, conversation about what we need to do to be able to fix this. One will be putting in place more persons to support older persons, but there are other options I think Barbados is going to have to explore at another time. But to answer your question directly, Minister, I would love to say to you, yes, that we're going to increase the program, but I would be perhaps treading a little bit outside the crease.
Thank you, Minister. Second question, you and I had some discussions. In my constituency, I had a training program, care of the elderly, with a course loading for 20 persons. 90 persons turned up to the program, and we had the discussions in relation to the content of the course. My question is it possible for your ministry and mine to collaborate in terms of putting together a program that will not only take care of the actual training program, but to create some employment? Because if we are having an aged population, then there's going to be a need to have persons come in and take care of those said people. So my question is it possible for us to collaborate where you can provide the information that will make that certificate worth a little more than it currently, the way it is currently carrying?
So thank you. I'm very glad to hear that something is coming organically from the community and is not something that is being developed and then handed to the community. So certainly it is an area that we can collaborate on. Obviously there'll be other entities that would have to be involved as it relates to the training, and if the training can be accredited. So there'll be other entities that we will work with, and we sure can follow up and collaborate on it.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I want to commend you too, actually, because I know a number of persons who took your program, the elder care program, and I say to them to get involved in this space. So I think there are a number of persons now who would have gone through your program who are saying they want to work with the elderly. And before your program, they were not interested in working with the elderly. So I know that it has stimulated a number of persons to become active in this space. And this could only augur well, I think, for us being able to resolve what I know is coming. And so I will make every effort to work with you to make sure that your program is in a position to be strong enough to put persons into position when they've completed the program.
Thank you. Chair, my third question is a mass from the north. Minister, what is the situation, or what would cause an officer to cut the benefits for a mother with a child with disabilities? And in addition to that, what is the timelines what are the timelines for an officer to get back to a client after doing what you would call a social visit? Because it is creating some issues in my constituency in St. John as it relates to single mothers who are unemployed, and the benefits are being cut the benefits are being cut. And then I'm getting a situation where officers are doing visits, but they're never getting back to the clients in relation to what is the outcome of that visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I think that question is best answered by the Deputy Chief Welfare Officer.
Thank you for the question. As it relates to welfare grant being cut, Remember, when we start the service as it relates to offer it to the individuals, we would have looked at their circumstances. And over the time, when we review them again, we will again look at their circumstances. A check may be offered at the point in time where the person probably was not working, but if the person is working, we sit down again and we look at that individual, we check to see how best then that new fund that you are getting in the household is able to address the needs that the welfare check obviously would have been presenting at that particular point in time to address that particular need. Now, again, for us, we still have a large number of outstanding applications. We still have where the client to welfare officer ratio is still very large. So for us, we are definitely welcoming the amalgamation, because that means then we will have more staff to be able to respond more adequately to the person's needs as it relates to getting back to the clients that have been visited that the officer may not have been able to get back to, because it is a case where the officer is trying to meet everybody's need. They're trying to speak to everybody at the point in time. They're trying to respond to emails. They're trying to respond to WhatsApps. They're trying to respond to phone calls at the time. And also, remember, we've now gone electronically. So it means a lot of what is being done is being typed into the system. So that, in its essence, has been part of the challenge that we've been faced with in terms of being able to respond to persons that we have visited.
All right. I don't think you've answered the question. What are the timelines? How long before? Is it a week to respond? And the situation I mentioned in relation to the assistance being cut, the mother is still unemployed. Nothing would have changed.
Okay. Again, as I was saying, in terms of, well, we would ideally would like to put a timeline to where it is we'll be able to get back to the individual. At this point in time, we have been unable to do that because of the numbers that we've been dealing with. And hopefully going forward with the new entity, those processes are things that can be put in place that helps with, once we have the numbers in terms of working, as I said, be able to put those things in place, like responding to persons in a more efficient and timely manner to improve the service as we go ahead. As it relates to the client, I would say to the client, please reach out to the officer again. Unfortunately, let's sit again, let's deliberate and see what is happening as it relates to what is new happening in that household.
Minister, I hear your concern though, and I think the point on timelines is something we have to address. I tell my staff, I remember when we meet, when I worked most of my life for the government. I could get a file, the file could stay on my desk as long as I had liked. There were hardly any consequences. And I left to go and work for the Canadians, and there were very strict timelines. You got a file, they have an idea how long it would take for this file to be actioned, and within specified times, you had to respond. I think we had Mr. Pollard, who's there, but also the PS would know we had conversations around in a new entity to associate in certain tasks with timelines. You know, responding to people by certain times and so on. I think the other thing that's going to be beneficial is that we're going digital. So it's going to be a lot quicker to be able to respond to persons with the new computer system, as well as the fact that we are locating a lot of our systems within the communities themselves. So I think those things are going to make a big difference in terms of our capacity to respond. But we have to give clients the satisfaction that we will respond in a proper time. We also documented in a process map each step. So we will be sharing that with the public very soon. You walk into a center, this is what you're asking, these are the steps. And so you would know along the way where your request or your concern is in the system, documented in a process map. And then to answer your first question, but answer it last, unfortunately, the one in relation to cutting persons, some with disabilities. There are some people who should never get cut from welfare. There are some people whose circumstances will never, ever, ever change and should never, ever be cut. The truth is that most of those persons are not cut, but on occasion. There are the odd occasion where a person is cut, that should not be cut. And we have to put in place systems to ensure that it doesn't happen. I mean, it's simple. It is not the officer's fault, it is the system. The computer system, sometimes at the end of a period for review, if the person isn't reviewed, then the person is cut. And you may put in the system that this person has to be reviewed once a year, once every 2 years. The time comes, the person is reviewed, the person is cut. So it is really about us tidying some systems. We had this conversation this morning. There's some systems that we have to be able to tidy to make sure we better deliver to persons, but I understand it. In those circumstances, normally though, I'm sure the deputy chief would agree, when those persons are made known without any kind of quarrel, those persons are normally put back onto the system. But I agree that it should not happen in some cases in the first place.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, let me compliment the Minister. Like the Leader of the Opposition, I know his heart. I know it's in the right place. And I know his heart and his brain work in harmony. I know we have heard a number of contributions here that are universal and they're very much repetitive. And some of the issues that we're talking about addressing are issues that I heard even long before this present administration was in office. And these are problems that the ministry in general, especially the welfare department, they've been wrestling with these problems for a considerable time. In some cases, the social and economic imbalance, I know the minister in his preamble spoke a lot about the emphasis on the transformation, the economic transformation. I believe that he meant, or I probably didn't hear well, he meant the social economic transformation of the different marginalized people into mainstream in the economy. I am concerned, and I don't know if my colleague would fully support me, I'm concerned about the transformation of the so-called disabled community. I've been wrestling with the psychology of what is the right term for a considerable time. And every time I say disabled, I feel as though there's something that we need to discuss a little longer about disabled persons. I was once Minister responsible for social transformation, and the discussion on differently able, disabled, even in the NGO movement, the disabled community, that decision on if it should be called disabled, which I believe is also an obstacle in the psyche of people in terms of how they respond to this community, the disabled community. If we are building if we are building a civil environment, and these words must not be ignored, and I made this mention of this before. I was talking to my colleague here about the word imbecile and how long it stuck in the vocabulary of Barbadian people, especially inscripted on documents in the immigration department. And he gave me the insurance, so I still will check if that word still exists. I still believe that the transformation or the reform system is too passive, that this disabled community has been hanging on the outside for a considerable time. Every now and then there's a cosmetic exercise by putting a person with these challenges in the Senate. Yet there are many ordinary working class people on the ground, because I represent that class. I've actually given myself that eternal assignment to represent that class. I don't know what the other social groups, because I'm not part of their socialization, but I know that these people, we have not brought them into mainstream, and some people live an entire lifetime and never was able to enjoy the happiness of the able-bodied type of persons in this society. I know I can't speak too long, sir, but I am just pondering on not the American system of affirmative action. I believe that we have a lot of obstacles or inhibitions in the legislations that we have. And I personally believe that the state policy should be clear, that a certain percentage, I know there are people who oppose this concept of a quantum or a quota system being applied in legislation, but the disabled community starts with a major disadvantage. And sometimes they are extremely sharp academically but cannot get a job, sometimes because they have no hands. Sometimes the nature of the job don't even require a finger. We should have something in the system. I work in that ministry and we never employ a disabled person or a person that I thought was disabled by looking at them. We should have the government itself and its offices should make provisions in its, not somebody feel, I feel for this body and I'm giving them a job. Affirmative action legal instrument would put the minister in a position that he must give as long as the person has the required qualities or attributes. That minister should be bound by the legislation to employ X amount to persons from the disabled community. You can't expect the disabled community every 5 years or every estimate to hear these melodies. And then very few people in the disabled community. Too many young men I see now in wheelchairs. They have nothing to do. They can't get any work. They give up very early. I don't even know how well they...
Honorable member, you need to proceed with your first question, sir.
But sir, I'm suggesting to the minister to extrapolate from the simplicity that I'm suggesting. I can put it in question form. Do you think it is wise for a government who speaks about progressive development to put affirmative action program in place? Because, sir, the reason why I had that lengthy presentation, because this thing needs clarity. And if I come to Parliament, I need to give clarity to what I'm saying and to give a justification. So that's the only reason why I can get up and ask a straight, simple question, not even one that is complex or compound. I could get up and ask a straight question, but I don't believe in that. So I'm just asking the minister, what is his feelings on bringing to Parliament an affirmative action program, even if the legislation is drafted exclusively for the disabled community?
Thank you, honorable member. The questions that you asked, the ideas that you've raised, we've obviously discussed and pondered. Some I've raised in here this morning. The nomenclature in relation to what is appropriate in the community, sir, has been set by the community. I believe if I were to ask, and I may not do so, but if I were to ask any of the persons who are here to speak to why we say disabled, I think that is the term with which they are most comfortable at this point in time. The language may change from time to time, but what is important is that the persons for whom the term is meant to describe, that they feel a sense of comfort with the term. And if they are comfortable with it, then so am I. The second is in relation to the number of persons that we have that the ministry perhaps should employ persons with disabilities, we have already employed 5. And which is perhaps honorable member more than you. But we've employed 5 to date, and there's no law. There's no law as it stands, but we have done it because I know, like, you know my heart, I also know your heart, so I know this is not a game for you. This is the reality. We've hired persons because it is our commitment so to do. PS would tell you that I always tell PS that our ministry cannot be the ministry responsible for persons with disabilities, and we don't hire persons with disabilities. I say all the time, and that when persons walk into our ministry, it has to reflect this. The other point is in relation to the policy and the legislation. You will be happy to hear, honorable member, that the legislation does speak to this. We had said previously that 10% of all housing should go to persons with disabilities. The Honorable Minister of Housing, the Honorable Minister of Housing would tell you that that has become the reality, and that the last set of housing developments that were built out, 10% went to persons with disabilities. The legislation that we proposed, the policy that came to Cabinet and was agreed upon, the draft legislation, speaks to giving 5% of all jobs in Barbados to persons with disabilities. Now, I feel that affirmative action is necessary sometimes to correct a wrong, so I'm not going to challenge it or question it, of course, because we brought it. But I also feel that the system has to be able to be fair and to produce persons with disabilities, but who have had the benefit of all that the rest of us have had. So that when I spoke this morning, I spoke of persons who, you know, if you have 5 CSCs, you get the job, but you can't get to school, so you can't get the CSCs because the transportation is off, or because your health needs additional attention, you don't have the resources for the health. It is a complicated, complex situation. We have to address it in all of its component parts. And until such time, I strongly support the 5%. It is a conversation we are going to continue to have with the private sector. And believe it or not, the private sector was actually very open to the idea of hiring persons with disabilities. They just wanted to know the framework within which they would have to do it. Some of them that were smaller obviously were concerned because you have to spend monies. In some cases, you have to change the computers. You may have to make the place more disabled friendly, as you should anyhow. And so that is the reality. But you, sir, were a former minister, so I know that you fully understand this and you care about this topic. I feel also that because the policy came from the 60-something meetings chaired by the Honourable Member for St. James North, supported by persons who were either from the community, disabled community, or relatives of persons in the community, having had 60-something meetings, that policy is shaped in truth. That policy is shaped and girded in truth so that it reflects the honest realities and opinions of the community. That policy was then used to shape the legislation. And for the first time, I believe by the middle of this year, this Parliament will be debating legislation that protects the rights of persons with disabilities, and a bill that was really drawn up by persons with disabilities. So I feel like in this particular matter, honourable member, that we are on solid footing. I do not think that this is anything, I can't remember the word you used, but it's sure not anecdotal. It is nothing hairy-fairy. This is for real. We've done the work. I believe it reflects the position that the disabled community would have us reflect. And as we did, when we sent the Child Protection Bill to Select Committee, if it comes to that, we are prepared to send this bill also to Select Committee to get further consideration of the bill, to get further input on the bill, and to have further persons speak to the bill. So I am comfortable that the bill that will be before the Parliament will be one that allows us to do the very things that you are asking us to do.
Thank you, Minister. But in addition to that, we had developed a new paradigm some time ago where other ministers were also invited to participate in the actual policy decisions or to influence the policy decisions of this government. It was a wider concept of inclusion. I believe, based on the manner in which the officers who were former ministers that would have been looking at issues related to those who are on the social and economic rims, I thought that the inputs were positive and it could be very helpful. Also at that meeting, we had the staff of this ministry. And I don't know the final report, but even without the written report, based on the interaction, I believe that is a form or a model that ought to be repeated on a regular basis. Since then, I've never heard about any meeting of its kind. The reason why I'm saying that, I just want to surrogate make a point, but I also witnessed other persons express themselves fairly extensively, but I'm not going to be deliberately going over the limited time that you're giving to me. I hear all kinds of strange things I hear about Humphrey, and you're similar to Humphrey in the 1960s, at a time when credit should be given to people like Martin Luther King and Stuart Carmichael, only because of the Civil Rights Act. I don't know if the person intended to go so far, but I prefer to liken you with the work of men like Martin Luther King, who stood up for social justice. And that is why I feel very comfortable having a minister like you. And I know most of the members of the staff here, some of them probably came after I was placed in exile. But sir, I feel that that paradigm that I talk about is essential. It was the failure of the government of Tanzania under Julius Nyerere. Nyerere said that his government failed because the bureaucrats did not know what he intended to do. So interaction, dialogue among persons of like minds ought to be encouraged. I think that we are attempting to build, you speak a lot about the transformation of people and so on. I think that that is what we're doing. My only difference is that I believe the transformation should be radical and not one of a reformist in nature. Reformism is reform, I call it reformism. This reform thing, it has a traditional tone. And I believe that there are things that we can do. There are things that we can identify that normally you might not even hear about them in Parliament. But if you have that kind of dialogue, it can be helpful so that the officers will feel an integral part of the final decisions and have a clear idea what your vision or what the government vision is for the transformation of people who are on the economic and social rims of the society itself. I don't have to specify them, whether to go to the welfare department or whether they're disabled people, but I think we can have a conversation of that kind. And I'm not only asking, but I'm recommending that we have this kind of approach to addressing some of these problems.
Honorable member, I totally agree. We had a conversation with former ministers of social transformation, social care, and at that meeting we had, permit me sir to say a few names, we had Hamilton Lashley, Cynthia Forde, who was the immediate past minister and did a brilliant job. We had Trevor Prescod, who was also a minister and did a great job. And we also had Dr. Lowe. And I think my staff would have expected Minister Prescod to be there. Trevor Prescod came and I said that Minister Prescod was there. I think they expected Hamilton Lashley to be there. Minister Prescod being a former Barber Civil Party minister, Hamilton Lashley being a former Barber Civil Party minister, my very good friend. Both of them in a way, both Minister Prescod and Minister Lashley, former mentors, if I'm being very honest. I think they expected both Minister Prescod and Minister Lashley to be supportive of the idea because they were former Labour Party ministers. Although Minister Lashley wasn't, then he wasn't. And Cynthia Forde. But I think they found the relationship between Dr. Lowe and myself surprising. And the relationship that I have with Dr. Lowe was because Dr. Lowe came in as Director of Social Policy. And I think all public servants and the ones that I work with are very professional. And regardless of your politics, you should conduct yourself in a professional manner all the time. And that is how I conducted myself when I worked at the time. But I think the comment made by Dr. Lowe at the time was that he was prepared to work with the ministry to offer ideas going forward, because ministers responsible for the social, I think we all accept that this is bigger than politics. You know, you have to. You can't be responsible for people and think it is about politics. So we had all agreed that we would meet on time on occasion, and the truth is we haven't had a follow-up meeting. I think the time has come, PS, for another one, because it is right now. We have child protection bill, elderly policy, LD draft bill. We have also finished the disability bill, the disability draft legislation. We're working on the gender policy, which should be before the cabinet by April as well. We're working on a homeless policy. This ministry is doing a lot of work, but I think it could benefit from that larger conversation as well, just to get the input of people who would have gone before to be able to do this work. And I think it's important too, because we live in an age where you're here today and then you're gone today too. So I find myself these days not going to many funerals. You know, I find myself tearing up at all of my constituents' funerals, to be honest. So I go to these funerals and I'm tearing up because I've invested my soul in people. And the truth is, there are a number of people here who would have invested their souls in me and invested their souls in this work. And so I think the best we could do is honor them when they're still here to help us formulate social policies for people. And I have zero objection to meeting with anybody. And I've said so before. I have zero objection to meeting with anybody. Those that I mentioned, those that I invited who did not come, just to be able to do this work. So Minister, I take your point. I think we should have had a follow-up meeting with former ministers of social. And I think we could also invite some who would have been responsible for community or youth as well, to be able to help us do some of this work. So you have no objection in me whatsoever.
One more question, sir. Some time ago, when obviously the late, I think she was, what her name was, Blondell Phillips. I can't remember her name well. Of the disabled community, Bonita Phillips. That's it? Bonita Phillips met myself and the former minister by the name of Glenn Clark at the bottom of the stairs there. And she asked us to take her on a journey in Broad Street and to come around Swan Street. And she said, based on her former experience in England, she was a little surprised that there was no accommodation on the sidewalks. And there were no facilities within the stores around Broad Street and Swan Street that if they came in the town and nature made a demand, there was no way for them to go. I know since then, I think we built the facilities in Independence Square, but I don't think that is enough. Because if a person of a disabled community is in Swan Street, I don't expect them to rush over to Independence Square, especially when there's an emergency. So I'm wondering, how is the private sector responding to the required calls back then? Because Mark Fingal also did it, went through the city, and also made the same call. How is the business sector responding to this call by the disabled community to have adequate facilities in the city in all the buildings, that somebody can go into the washrooms with a wheelchair. I think that is something we have to look at. I know that there was some concerns with even the specifications in relation to how the ramps were constructed. Are we monitoring situations of that kind? If you're going to be talking about the disabled community, we have to create the kind of environment, physical environment as well, that would allow the disabled community to face equal opportunities and equal privileges with persons who are considered to be able-bodied. So I'm just asking, this is some simple questions, sir, just for clarity so that I will know we are moving on, and I can then boast that the government is making progress and that the disabled community believes that this government is the best government that they've ever witnessed.
Thank you, Honorable Member. There were many meetings held, including the private sector, in relation to some of the changes that we are going to have to make proper accommodation. I am sure I wouldn't ask her to come again, but if the deputy chair had spoken to it, there would have been meetings with a number of persons in relation to building out Barbados. I think the other thing is the building codes, the new building codes that we were discussing have to make it mandatory. It's going to be difficult to retrofit every single building, obviously, at the same time. But I know for sure as we build out, we have to make sure that we take cognizance of the fact that you have to accommodate persons with disabilities. Some of the newer buildings we've also built and some that were built otherwise have not been as disabled friendly as they would like. And when I've been made aware of it, I've drawn it to the attention of the relevant personnel. But I think when we start to get the PR going and when we make it mandatory for persons to hire persons with disabilities, organically, some of these issues are going to be able to resolve themselves. There were some people who were concerned naturally about the cost of having to do a lot of this work, but think about the cost of not doing it. You know, Barbados, I just said in my opening and somewhere in the middle that the country needs persons to produce. The ministry has to be a ministry that recognizes people as more than just passive recipients of goods and services, but that they're productive. But if you limit a significant number of your population because they have a disability from being able to participate, then you do yourself and the country and those persons a disservice. So yes, we have to do more work. I think there has to be a lot of consultation, perhaps even a militancy in relation to pushing for this to happen and to happen in the shortest possible time. But it is nothing on which we will drop this ball, I can tell you. I feel very strongly so that even if I am in this ministry or not, this is something that I intend to see through. I know the passion of the former minister, Minister Sandra Husband, and of course I know everybody knows the passion of the member for St. James North. So there are a number of persons in this government who are very, very supportive of making this kind of thing necessary and mandatory. And perhaps, to be truthful, Honorable Member, too, in the last year, 2 years, we focused a lot on getting the legislation right, getting the policies right, having those levels of meetings, putting in place those systems. I think as we shift our attention now to the empowerment component of the ministry's mandate, this is going to become more important in relation to making sure that people are able to access these places. So I hear you, Honorable Member. We have not forgotten it. It is something that we are working actively on to ensure that it happens.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much as well, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
And thank the Honorable Minister for answering with great clarity.
Honorable Member for Christchurch East.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for recognizing me. Honorable Member for St. Michael South, I want to commend you and your team not only for the presentation, that you've done in here today that seem to have been wholeheartedly accepted by no less a person than the Honorable Leader of Opposition himself, but also in relation to the service that you do provide for the people of Barbados. Now, Honorable Member, I guess it's a catch-22 for you, because a lot of people don't know what services the Welfare Department covers and what it does not cover, what is available and what is not available. I guess the issue for you is you don't necessarily want to overly publicize things and then be deluged by requests, but equally, it is still necessary for persons who are actually genuinely in need to know what they can or cannot approach the Welfare Department for. So I'm just wondering, with all of the facilities that you do offer, what is the plan for advising the public of Barbados what they can approach the Welfare Department for? That's question number one. I'm just going to give you all of them. Number two, I need a little bit of lead into this one. When we went about the deconstruct and reconstruct of the Immigration Department, one of the things that was deliberately done, there were lots of complaints about persons being unfriendly or unmannerly in the front office, or you didn't feel that you were being helped. Now, we took a decision that everybody who was front-facing, everybody who had to deal with the general public, had to have a pleasant disposition, right? If you were not a naturally pleasant person, and that's something that you could not help, then we put you somewhere else. But ye who had to deal with the public had to be someone that the public could feel comfortable with. Now, Minister, I have on many occasions, contacted you directly for assistance for persons who are in need, and I must say that every time you have tried to help. Sir, if I can have latitude to call 2 more names, because I'm calling them in a positive light. I have called Ms. Bob a number of times. She's probably sorry I ever got a hold of her phone number, but I have called her directly for assistance, and she has rendered the assistance, and this is in particular on weekends. I have called a Mr. Wayne Nurse. I don't even know who he is, where he's in charge of. I called Mr. Nurse because at one point in time he helped me, and I reach out to him and he would direct me to somebody, or he would take it over and somebody would contact or render the assistance. But that should not be the case, Minister, right? It should not be that I have to go up a chain or pick individual people. It should be that those who have responsibilities for certain areas or those who have responsibilities for certain aspects of welfare are accessible and willing to render the assistance required in a timely fashion. When somebody reaches out for welfare, it's because that person has hit a low that they can't help themselves out of. They require the assistance of the state to get past a hump, to save themselves, to save the family, to save the house, to save the dignity. It is not a call made lightly. I do believe that persons who are welfare officers, who are contact or point persons, should be available 24/7, 7 days a week, 52 weeks in a year. And if it is not that particular person, because sometimes you have to roster people out, there must be a point of contact on weekends. In a lot of instances, you cannot reach a person to assist somebody on a weekend. People get put out on weekends too. People need help on weekends too. Miss Bob, in particular, I reach out to her on weekends. Poor Mr. Nurse, he was the first one I ever had contact with. I reach out to him all the time. But I think my point is made. People feel badly to have to be in a position to approach welfare. We must not make them feel any worse by the services being inaccessible at certain points in time, or the persons who are supposed to deliver those services being inaccessible. So I would like to know what is being done, sir, to address this problem. I can't be the only person who has the problem, right? I know for certain others have the problem. So I want to know what is being done to make it a 24/7, 52 operation. And I would also like to know what are y'all going to do to let the public know what to expect, what is covered, what is not covered, what circumstances you will accommodate, what circumstances you will not accommodate. It may take some pressure off of you with people making requests or contacts you for things that you can't do.
Thank you, honorable member, for the question. I think I will let the deputy chief welfare officer address the services that are offered. But I should say that the Bureau of Social Policy has also worked on a directory of social services, which outlines the programs that the ministry has available. I'm sure many people don't even know the programs that are available in this ministry and other social ministries, and that we're going to launch that. We were discussing launching it around the launch of another meeting now around this meeting. We're going to launch that very soon to make the public aware of some of the programs that are available in this ministry. I will come back on if I will speak now and then I will allow the director to speak on the second question, but Deputy Chief, I want you to address the programs offered by welfare. Honorable member, there was, as a student of policy, there was a time welfare meant well, faring well. It's very simple. It meant that you were faring well. There was welfare and there was ill fare. You were faring ill. Welfare in its original definition is a good word, you know. It meant a system of support. People were faring well. I think the bureaucratic nature of welfare, delivery of social services over the years have made, not only in Barbados, all over. And when people have had this kind of institutional approach to delivery of welfare services that has really not, in some cases, delivered this idea that, in social democratic states, that the state must be responsible for the delivery of many things. And the name alone now, welfare, across the developing world, not only in Barbados, puts a sense of trepidation in people. But I think the welfare department in Barbados in the last few years certainly has done a lot of work in relation to customer relations, in relation to how they treat people. The staff has been under a lot of pressure. We've had cases where one welfare officer had sometimes 300-400 clients. The pressure was real. And I commend the staff for the work that they would have done in these difficult circumstances. The PS has spoken about the things we've put in place to offer some support, because I recognize, obviously, that I have two clients. I have my constituents and the public of Barbados on the one hand, but I also have staff on the other hand, and I care very deeply about my staff too. So that is why we have to put in place systems to be able to support them. But they know, because I say it all the time, that my mother once had the misfortune of having to engage a social worker from housing. And the way she was treated was not nice. And I think the reason she was treated that way is because when the officer visited our house, my house was clean. The Deputy Prime Minister would tell you, she knows my mother well, very clean all the time. When she worked, she'd acquired a VCR and a stereo set. And when the person came, these were the things that concerned the officer. How could you be asking for help when you got all these things? Now, that was many years ago, but I understand how these things could serve to cripple. My mother would never go back. And many other persons in those circumstances would never go back. I've made it my business to make sure that does not become the reality of the welfare department. They know, everybody around me here knows very well. There's not a person beside me or behind me who don't know very well. And when it comes to how people are treated in welfare or any other social service agency, that I feel very strongly about it. But I also know that the welfare department has made great steps in relation to how they treat people. The chief welfare officer has been exemplary. You've heard the deputy chief. I'm sure many people in Barbados have heard her for the first time, and she's extremely articulate and competent. And also recognizing that there's a need for us to treat people with dignity. Dignity has to be the way we do business. And while a lot of what is being said is what was, I do believe that there are many changes that are positive that are happening. And so I would wish to say that I commend my staff. I feel very satisfied that we've gone a long way from where the traditional conversation would have gone. And this is nothing new. This conversation occurred many years ago when I was manager of Child Care Board. Before that, when Minister Prescod was there, when Minister Prescod was there. This is an old conversation, and I believe we've made some changes. But on the last question you raised, most of my fires have occurred on weekends. Most of my fires have occurred at night. And like you, I found myself without anybody to call. Obviously, it changes when you become minister, but I found myself without anybody to call. And so the resilience unit, Mr. Pollard may wish to speak after Ms. Kimbabwe, but the resilience unit is to offer 24-hour service. And to be those persons that are on point, on, what do you call it when somebody is available? On call, those persons that are on call should be made known to the relevant persons in fire, persons in the police, the member of parliament, and so on, so that the person has access at that point. But I will ask Ms. Kimbabwe to speak, and then Mr. Pollard.
Okay, thank you very much. The Welfare Department, in providing its services to all persons within Barbados, our mission is the resolution of individual and family problems, enhancement of personal and social development, alleviation of poverty, and the empowerment and rehabilitation of disabled, disadvantaged, and those affected by crises and natural disasters. Therefore, in order for us to achieve this mission, we have two set programs. This will be the National Assistance Program. Under the National Assistance Program, we offer services regarding the payment of electricity bills, water bills, provision of bottled gas, clothing, dentures, food vouchers, furniture, hearing aids, private rent payment, Pampers, and spectacles. We also offer educational assistance for the children who are returning to school during the summer vacation as it relates to that request. We as well provide another program called the Family Services Program, and under this program, we provide court reports, which is the courts and their deliberations regarding the cases that are presented to them. They will then make requests of us in order to guide them in that deliberation. We offer counseling to a level where we have determined that there is a need for further counseling. We have engaged psychologists, and we refer the required clients to the psychologists who will continue any form of counseling that is needed in depth and provide any reports that will be required in terms of those services that has been offered. Have I answered your question, sir?
You have, but my point with this one is that this is something that we need to get out there. So by now I figured out what it is that you do or do not offer, but I think the public, and I'm prepared to work with your ministry to publicize it. It is important that the public of Barbados actually knows the do's and don'ts and what is or is not available. And just as a final question, because that was two, but this one is actually very short. In keeping with the same thing, for your resilience unit, it is important as well. Now, I've had the benefit of, I probably think I was the first person, I believe, to benefit from your resilience unit, but we need to get that information, sorry, not we, you need to get that information out there as well as to what is available, what are the commitments made to the landlords, so that landlords in particular have some degree of comfort now. Because landlords, as you well know, did not want to rent to welfare, right? So we just need to get that messaging as to what arrangements are being made with landlord to give some comfort, and you might find it's a lot easier to place people in a situation of distress than it was before. So I'll finish, Mr. Chair, as I started. I want to commend you for your presentation. I want to commend the majority of your staff for a job well done, and your department for their service to the people of Barbados. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I take it you say the majority because only the majority spoke, but really you mean all who spoke. I may ask Honourable Mr.
Yes, that's right.
I call him Honourable Mr. Pollard to just speak to the Resilience Unit very quickly, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Minister. With respect to the issue of the 24-hour service, the Resilience and Reintegration Unit. We recognize, as you have said, and as we all notice, we have fires usually at certain quote-unquote ungodly hours. Yes, thanks. Yeah, inconvenient hours. Mostly at night and on weekends. So we met with the Barbados Fire Service, I think that was 2 weeks ago, and we are discussing placing care packages at their service stations so that as soon as a fire, as soon as they're notified about a fire, they will just grab the care package and go and deliver it to persons who are in need at the fire. We are going to meet with other stakeholders as well. I don't want to disclose their names here because we haven't notified them as yet, but we are going to meet with them so that we can have a more holistic approach to the 24-hour service. Part of the Resilience and Reintegration Unit will have 2 field investigators, and a major part of their task would be to service the 24-hour emergency situation so that we would have someone always on call to service those emergencies that are in inconvenient hours. Basically, that's a major part of what will happen in the Resilience and Reintegration Unit. And yes, you are right, Minister. We need to publicize it more and also liaise more with the landlords. And earlier today we had mentioned the honorable member for, I can't remember where, senior minister had mentioned that about the ad. And we are going to move expeditiously to ensure that the ad is even more robust. So we are also going to be looking at testimonial ads so that landlords we deal with can let the public know that there is beneficial to work with us. And we believe that will bring us more clients. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. I think the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 5:15.
The question is that this honorable chairman will be suspended until 5:15 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chairman stands suspended until 5:15 p.m.